From Wakefield, it's the Nolan Night Show, inviting you to join Nolan and his guest this week returning back to the show, Kyle Standing. And now, ladies and gentlemen, here's Nolan.
And welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to yet another edition of the show. Hopefully, you've enjoyed what you've watched the last few weeks, and especially last week's episode, Nathan Robillard. I want to bring on another guest, or I have bring on another guest, I should say, who came on almost a year ago during the time of Archie Miller's hiring. Now he's been here, of course, for nearly a year, and I thought, what better to have this guest on again than during these moments of URI basketball history and another era of Rhodey women's basketball history as I struggle to speak. He is a decent man. He's a great man. He is a man who's on the front line of covering all these sports and seeing it firsthand instead of us ticket holders in the stands. He is the man himself, Mr. Kyle Standing. Kyle, how are you?
I'm great, Nolan. It's good to be back. I'm good. I'm happy to be back with you.
Sure, yeah, of course. I'm always appreciative of having those on who are in your position who are able to do this so publicly and so frequently and be able to experience this firsthand compared to I'm sure as you can understand or realize maybe not able to cover these sports right away as fast as you have at other schools, whether they're bigger or smaller institutions. Now, I mentioned some things that have happened since the last time you were on here as a guest last March, and or near the end of March actually, when it came out, nearly the beginning of April, and a few things not just on the men's side but the women's side as well as other side stuff as well. So besides the sports stuff, which we'll get to, of course, momentarily, but for you since last on, it's been nearly a year. How's life been for you?
It's been good. Staying busy. Covering as much as I can. I actually just finished up at the 5 Cent Cigar. I was the sports editor last semester, so great experience there. But now just kind of taking my time to look for jobs and getting my resume and everything prepared. So exciting times for that. But the summer was good and I had an internship and everything. So yeah, I mean, stay like I said, staying busy and that's the goal. Just keep moving forward.
Yeah, it's the only thing you can do, but it's good to stay busy because it knows that you're active and you're enjoying the process that you're in. I had Nathan and I sort of asked him about how now he's sort of getting more into reporting stuff and covering sports post pandemic. And you were there last year in well, I should say the last few years when it was really raging and difficult to do stuff. So from your perspective, former sports editor of the Good Fight Sun Cigar and covering sports on TV with a wide array of different talents along with yourself, what's it been like to now be part of this situation where it's sort of, I don't want to say back to normalcy, but a sense of what it seemed to be like before 2020, where you can report and cover games and you don't have to worry about wearing a mask or doing it from home or doing it from the radio station, whatever it may be.
Yeah, I have to say, this year has been amazing. And my sophomore year was, obviously the COVID year, and it was super, super just depressing. And, staying inside every day while there's basketball games going on, the arenas are empty, and I'm kind of thinking like this is the time when I'm trying to get my foot in the door and start doing this stuff. So it would really hurt not to be able to do that sophomore year. But now that everything's kind of back to normal, it kind of feels like or my freshman year again. And um, you got good amount of fans in the crowd, and you can just kind of go and enjoy it. And it's unfortunate that the team, the men's team at least, might not be as good as our freshman year when we were, kind of like packing the Ryan Center and everything. But it's still been so awesome to be able to just go and enjoy my experience and not have to worry about any, kind of outside factors.
Well, I want to start with the men's team. It's been a year, as I've said many times so far in the few seconds we've been doing this while it's recording, that Archie Miller was hired at the end or middle of March of 2022, and it's been nearly a year. And you know the season they've had so far. I know the season they've had so far. We've both been there. Your take or assessment on the hire of Archie Miller so far?
Yeah. So I'm gonna stick with, how I felt at the beginning, which was this is a really good hire. I still feel really confident in what he's doing. I think every game that I've been to, you can see the stamp that he's having on the program in terms of The culture that he's creating, I think I'm having, personally as an announcer and as a reporter, I'm having a lot more fun watching the games. They move up and down the floor really quickly. They play aggressive. They play hard. They're guard centric, so it's fun to watch. He did mention when back when back during his introductory press conference when we kind of around that time when we talked. Um, he said, it's not going to happen right away. We're not going to be amazing right away. So just have some patience. And that's kind of the approach that I've always had with it is, take what you can get this year. It's the first year of his tenure, and he's going to be here for a few more years. The record doesn't, I think a lot of fans would say the record isn't what, we were hoping for. And sitting there 8-14 and 4-5 in the conference, 4-6. So it's, we're right. Like we've lost a couple close games. It's been, overall, you would say it's been a disappointing season because of the standards that URI has as a program. But I think that things are looking up.
Sure.
Despite that.
Well, and on a brief side note, and I'll mention it a few moments later. But you see games like the Dayton game or the LaSalle game where there are flashes of brilliance. Specifically, I believe it was the LaSalle game where they're up big at multiple times and they're leading the majority of the game. You can see that there's brilliance that can be had with this team. But as you also saw at the beginning of the year, there were moments where you're trying to figure out which lineups are going to gel together. There are some on the court frustrations you're seeing by some of the cast members that haven't been there at URI or maybe have been there in recent years. So Archie Miller's doing his best to put out these fires and try to figure out what's going to work. Speaking of that, and it's been known the last few years in previous administrations, or maybe just the previous staff, where players would get frustrated that they're not getting what they want, the minutes or ball possessions, whatever it may be that think they should be getting, air quotes especially, and they go home and they transfer to another school and get what they think they deserve. For Archie Miller, and I just said it early in the season that he's working on lineups that are changing. Obviously, there have been injuries and red shirts and players not being able to qualify for the season, and just trying to work on things and making sure he's on top of things like attitudes and so forth, as he alluded to in his press conference, in order to make sure that the bleeding doesn't stop where kids leaving the program year after year as it has been in the past. What do you think Archie Miller needs to do as a coach this off season, but then also leading into next season?
Yeah, I mean, I think he got himself off to a great start in terms of making sure that he has a roster that stays intact because he brought in a bunch of guys. The only player that we would be losing, obviously with the exception of transfers, would be Malik Martin. So there's, it's a young team. It's a team that I'm sure when he was recruiting these guys, or in the case of Ishmael Leggett or Jalen Carey, getting them to stay. He was saying, this is going to take a couple years, but we're going to develop you into a really good player. We'll get you to where you want to go, that kind of thing. So I think his recruiting approach is what's going to be the biggest factor in that. It's not, you don't want to bring in a guy and tell them, we expect to be really good, blah, blah, blah. You don't want to lie to them
Sure.
basically and have them be disappointed, like you said, during the season. Oh, you're going to get all this playing time, blah, blah, blah. Obviously, he has a pretty deep rotation. He likes to sub a lot, which is great. And um, it's fine, but you'd hope because we saw like with the David Cox era and my freshman year when when everybody basically left after the season. I think URI fans fear that a lot now, but I think he's recruited young guys who are committed for multiple years to the
Sure.
program, um, and I would hope that he would continue to do that down the line. Like I said, it's going to be a process. It's going to take some patience because, like I said, it's a young squad and a lot younger than some of these other teams in the Atlantic 10. But I think once they get that experience, and he brings in a couple more guys, I think it's going to be looking
Sure.
really good.
Talking about some of these games, Stony Brook, Dayton, LaSalle, they have a decent home record. That it was, I forget which game it was, where it was the first home loss in a while. I don't think it was the PC game, but it might be another game. Point being, they have a decent home record. Away record isn't as impressive as the home record.
Yeah.
The separation from home to away, obviously the home crowd helps a lot, but the separation from playing well at home to then playing sketchy away, what do you think is the contributing factor or factors in that?
Yeah, I mean, just to give you a numbers idea, I just pulled it up. So they're 8-14 overall, and they're 8-7 at home. So they're 0-7 on the road right now.
Ugh,
It's it almost feels like it's kind of it's almost hard to lose 7 games in a row. But at the same time, when you're on the road, um, it's a completely different story. I think like we've been saying, it's a young team. um, it's a lot easier to kind of get through those moments where you look like a young team, and I've been saying to guys like Nathan and Zach Austin and a lot of these reporters that have been following the team, just they have these moments. They'll have 5 minute spurts where they look amazing, and they'll have 5 minute spurts where they look really bad. And
yeah,
um, I think at home it's a lot easier to get through that. The crowd can kind of get you through that, and I think, you know, they just seem to go flat, and they seem to be
sure,
deflated. Um, they give up a couple points. It'll be like an 8-0 run. I remember the Duquesne game specifically. It was like 2 steals for Duquesne, 2 dunks, and like a three. And all of a sudden, it just felt like the game was over with like 10 minutes left in the second half. So it's things that you would expect of a young team, still, lacking maturity at certain points in the game. And, like when you're going through a 5 minute scoring drought, you need to, get to the free throw line, find a way to get easy points. And I think
sure.
we're still missing some of that IQ where, they recognize certain situations and how to get out of them. But I think that it's a team that is really a lot more than last year. I think everybody on the team, 1 through 15, really, really cares about each other,
Sure.
and really, really cares about putting their best effort out on the floor every night. And they'll make mistakes. They'll make a lot of them, but I think that it's a team that will learn from the mistakes as time goes on.
This year, we've seen a lot of different changes to the program, obviously because it's a new coach and a new coaching staff. We've seen different changes. One thing I want to talk before we get to the other things is that last year we saw the departure at the end of former player and assistant coach TJ Buchanan from the staff, and he, as I said, he was a former player. He was successful. He was an assistant coach, long time assistant coach there, even to the Dan Hurley days. We saw a little bit perhaps at the end when Miller was putting together his coaching staff near the end, putting the few last touching pieces together, where there were a few former players who were in the loop in terms of possibly getting the roles. Unfortunately, wasn't the case. Seeing as we've shown a lot of hype and a lot of respect, whether just because it's a new era or not, for alumni, would you like to see an alumni, if the opportunity rose, to come back and join the coaching staff to sort of help in that area, or are you happy with sort of the coaching staff that is there right now?
No, I mean, I definitely think I was a big proponent during his coaching search of getting a URI alum. I was really hoping for Tyson Wheeler. Um, I just think someone who understands what it means to have a really good team at URI, and to have that cultural impact on the campus and the community around it. I think it would be really beneficial to the players, um, as well as Archie, who can't like fully grasp, at least right now, what it means to be a really good team in Kingston. It's a really big cultural impact. So I think having a guy like Tyson Wheeler who understands, who's been there before, or it could be a number of people. It could be Katino Mobley. I mean, there's so many people out there who, um, I mean, you even look, down at like Silk Owens and people like that down south. So it's like there's plenty of options out there. I just think it would be important. I mean, I think the staff, personally, let me just say this: I think the staff is great.
Yeah,
I think Dwayne Woodward is a really good recruiter. And he's him and Kenny Johnson are both really good recruiters. They are very well affiliated in the DC area and other big time recruiting areas. And they're also, kind of good compliments for Archie, where Archie is very fiery and up pace, just like very animated on the
For sure.
sidelines. They're very calm. They bring a nice calming presence for players, who might get. You can see, players can get overwhelmed a little bit sometimes by all the yelling, but to have those guys there is important. But I think just to have, even like one, just an additional assistant as a URI alum to
Sure.
um, kind of teach that URI culture to the players would be awesome.
On a completely different note, unlike the men's team, the women's team have done even better this year. They continue off on the meteoric run that they had last year onto this year. And it's just been a wild thing to do. Of course, unexpected, I'm sure, on both levels, both last year and this year, although this year more expected, I guess. For you to be as front center as you are with Nathan and Paige and so many others, what's it been like to be able to cover and experience this firsthand in your position, in your shoes?
It's been like nothing I've experienced before. The vibes around the women's basketball program are just incredible, and it's something that I would recommend anyone, if you can be a part of it, like go to a practice or go just be around Tammy and just experience what it's like to be a part of that team, because it's so unique. It's hard to explain because she's someone who cares so much about her players, and she's someone who cares so much about her program at the same time. And it just seems like everything is clicking right now. And I think she would even tell you this season was a bridge season for next year when she's bringing in some really, really, really talented freshmen. One who was nominated for the All American game, and then one who's top five ranked player in New York. So there's, this the sky is the limit right now for this program, and it's really, really extraordinary to see what she's done in such a short amount of time with the program that was my freshman year, as low as it could get.
Sure, yeah. I remember my freshman year at URI. The one story, I'm sure I mentioned this before. The one story for the women's basketball team that I covered was a preseason game, and it was such a weird atmosphere, to tell you the truth. And nothing against the former coaching staff, but it was weird, and you felt as though no one really cared here. It was sort of like, oh yeah, we're gonna. And I think the coach said, oh yeah, I made the non-conference schedule is going to be the toughest part about it. And I'm like, why would you make your non-conference schedule tougher than your conference schedule? That doesn't make sense. But oh well. So then to see this completely different switch, where now the focus is often on the women's program. They've had this meteoric rise, as I said, the last 2 years, but specifically this year as well. And it's just been a weird thing, and a good weird to see this, because growing up in South County, not having a talented women's college basketball program. I have two younger sisters who both play basketball, and it was never taken seriously, the program. So now for this program to be taken seriously and to have all the things that's happening to it, because as you said, originally this season, a gap to the next season where the two good transfers are coming in, but then to be this great is one thing, to then even be great next year. So it's now a moment where it's now the new culture, the new norm of being successful with UR women's basketball. But there were a few games this year where it was close. One game went into overtime, I believe, at home, and then another game was pretty close as well, recently as well. In a situation like last year, where they did really well throughout the year, and then they burned out at the end, and then they sort of had to end the season, which most probably and them weren't expecting. To continue on this journey that they've been a success so far this season is tough. It's probably taxing on the mind and on the body. To continue that to the postseason in hopes of making the big dance and not letting yourself get burned out and destroyed in the NIT again, what did they need to do to make sure that their quality is still high enough where they can say, oh yeah, we're just going to kick ass for the rest of the season and we're not going to get burned out?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Obviously that was kind of their downfall last year. It really felt like the air came out of the balloon after that loss to St. Joe's in the Atlantic 10 tournament last year. But you mentioned, the two close games recently. They just beat Davidson on the road, and before that, they beat St. Joe's in double overtime. Kind of got the revenge on them from last year. So they've kind of shown, their character, I think. And Tammy at the beginning of the season said, the biggest difference between this team this year and last year's team is she doesn't have to push players to be motivated and to work hard and practice hard every day. And these players, they just get up and they want to do it because they want to be successful. And I think you've seen that they really show a lot of maturity in some of these moments where things can go really wrong. I mean, the St. Joe's game is a great example where they were up 9, 10 points down the stretch and they blowed the lead. Last year's team probably would have lost that game, but this year, they stuck with it, they stayed strong, and they executed masterfully in the overtime periods. So um, it's a really impressive thing to see. And I think Tammi has also learned from last year. And she said, her biggest thing this year is not getting hung up so much on a championship and thinking so far down the line, but it's just focusing on the day-to-day
Sure.
operations, making sure that her players are focused and motivated each and every day to work hard. So I think, they've just been progressively getting better and worrying about themselves and, how they're progressing rather than focusing on, how are we going to win the Atlantic 10 championship? I think that's been the biggest difference. How are they going to, continue to do that down the line? I think um, just continue to do what they've been doing. Just, have that winning mentality of, it's all about the possession at hand, the play at hand, and just do your best in that moment. And they've shown a lot of maturity. I think if they just continue to show that maturity, I think they'll be all right.
Well, I think also another thing that I have seen through the program is that they're wanting to play at URI instead of this is one of the only few options that they got as a recruit, and they're choosing this because this is the best option for them at the moment. Kids are wanting to play for this team now. They're realizing, oh, hey, they're doing well now. I want to play here, and they have a warm environment. The coach actually wants to do something here. They want to create a legacy here. The coaching staff wants. The coaching staff has been practically the same thing since Tammi has gone to URI and Kingston, Rhode Island specifically. It's a moment where these players are now wanting to be part of trying to change the script of college basketball, not just in Rhode Island or at URI, but in New England as well, because for years it's been just the men's team. The men's team isn't doing well. Now the women's team can create their own path and sort of break the mold of other heavyweight teams. You see, for the last, many decades, UConn been the top women's program across the country, not just in the New England area for years. And of course, UConn the last few years have been a little challenged in a few areas. They lost the other day to number one ranked South Carolina by 4 or 5 points, as I saw. For URI, obviously they're moving up, and UConn and South Carolina are a whole different stratosphere than the URI women's team. Of course, we can't deny that. For URI to break the mold and the chains of other schools being the leading contributor to women's college basketball, for URI to be the top dog in this country at some point or in the area at some point, what do you think needs to do to accomplish that? Because at some point, that's probably what Tammi wants to do for her program to be number one in the country or the top team across the country.
Yeah, and I think she signed the 10-year contract with that idea of, let me see how far I can take this program in this 10 years. Do I think she'll stay longer? Definitely a possibility. I don't, it's too far down the line to look, but I think um, in order to get to UConn levels or South Carolina levels, I think she's on the right trajectory. She just needs to keep building on every year she's built on the season before. So, if you remember, I think it was it was my sophomore year when they won the Co-Atlantic 10 championship. They're co-champions in the regular season. It was a step up from, the season before where they were kind of middle of the pack. And then last year, obviously, was a huge step up from that, going 22-7. Um, so they just, they've continued to build. And then, last year, obviously, such a great season, but then left some to be desired. And it seems like this year they've kind of almost built on that as well. So, and then she's continuing to build on that,
Yeah.
her recruiting class that she's bringing in next year. So I think if she can bring in the caliber of recruits that she'll be bringing in this year, in the future, people who are, McDonald's All-American candidates, people who are nationally recognized, it's a huge deal. I mean, not even the men's basketball team. I mean, guys like Jalen Carey, Brandon Weston, Brayon Freeman were nationally acclaimed, but um, bringing in people that are on the national level and can compete with the recruits
Sure.
that will be going to South Carolina and UConn and Louisville, all these Stanford, these big schools. I think it says a lot about where she sees the program in a few years. And it's funny that you talked to Nathan last, because he's always said to me that he thinks by the end of that 10-year contract that URI will be up there competing with UConn for one of the best teams in New England. And to be honest, it sounds a little outlandish right now, because URI, we still kind of know URI for what it's always been, which is
Yeah.
not the best program. But I think Tammy's completely changed the complexion of the program, and I think um, like I said earlier, the sky really is the limit.
Sure. Um, I talked about the coaching staff, but the majority of it stayed back, has returned back minus one loss or a few years ago to I think it was Penn State, I believe. I can't remember. Point being, the majority of their staff over the last few years that Tammy's been here in Kingston has stayed the same. A, what does that show about her and what she's able to do in the program? But also B, when do you see it being a situation of, okay, Uri's done really successful year after year. Now the assistant coaches are getting options to go to bigger schools, either to be an assistant coach or a head coach.
Yeah, I think unfortunately that is something that's going to be coming up pretty soon. I think as fans of URI are starting to take notice of what's going on, I think other coaches and programs around the country are starting to take notice of, holy crap, look at this URI team that's 10-0 right now in the Atlantic 10. They're doing a lot of things right. And I think a lot of them have stayed because they respect Tammy so much. I think Tammy is just an amazing coach to work for and to be around. I think she's, from what I've seen at practices and games, like she's kind of like a friend to, um, these assistant coaches and players as much as she is a coach. And I think, with the exception of, I'm blanking on her name from last year, who left for Penn State. I think these coaches, will ride it out as long as they can with Tammy before they get something that they, eventually, I think you're going to have to take a job, if it's a head coaching job or if it's a job at a Power Five school. Um, but I think I would imagine that they've already turned down
Sure.
opportunities to stay with Tammy. So it just says so much about the kind of character that she brings, and the kind of people that she brings in as well. I think that's really important. People who are loyal and people who also have the same vision for the program that she does. uh, Adeni Amadou, a guy who came with her from Syracuse, to try and build this program with her. And then you have a coach like Megan Schonecker, who played for the program, has understanding of, what it's like to be good, and how important that is as well. And I think they just really like being a part of the program. But eventually, like you said, there's going to be opportunities down the line. I don't really fear that, though, because I think Tammy has Tammy's so well affiliated in the basketball community.
Sure.
Um, and I think that she can bring in assistant coaches from elsewhere that will be able to, do just as good a job as some of these people on the staff now. Not taking anything away
Sure.
from
Yeah.
them, obviously.
We'll see how it goes. It will be a scary thing, but I'm sure just like her recruits that she's gotten, both grad transfers and true freshmen, she'll find somebody to replace them and do a successful job with them. You're graduating soon, of course. You're entering the job market, the real world, not just making some money doing stories for the cigar each month or whatever it may be for internships at school or elsewhere. You'll be making some real scratch at some point. But of course, the job is more important than what you're making. For you, with the short time you have left at URI as a student and as a student reporter, what do you hope to accomplish with the time you have left?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I think, I have 3 games left to announce in terms of basketball. I'll be doing a few in the baseball season. Like I mentioned, I'm my time with the cigar is over. So, um, in terms of the impact that I want to leave on the school, I just like to, I don't know. I think I just like to be remembered in terms of my coverage, and try to, just like do the best I can in terms of these last few games that I'm announcing. I've had such a blast doing the basketball games, and I just really want to soak it all in these last three, and just enjoy the time that I have left, because I'm just so grateful to have had those opportunities, and announcing is something that I've really grown a love for. So I probably won't be able to do it right out of college. So, it's something that I don't know when I'll do it again. So I'm just going to try and, appreciate it while I can. And in terms of just like graduating and leaving the impact, I just hope that, I made my family proud. I hope that, I made the friends and people around me proud to, know me. And I just, want to continue what I've been doing, continue on that trajectory.
Sure. We of course, everyone, I'm sure, hopes for the best for your future. I want to end on a little game called This or That. Last time we did it, it was called the One Word Challenge. This is This or That. So I'll throw it something, and I'll say you'll have to choose either this or that if you're ready for it.
Got it. Let's do it.
Okay, first one: a roadie men's basketball or roadie women's basketball playoff run this postseason.
Women's, women's.
Roadie men's basketball sneaks into the big dance after a conference tournament win or an NIT run.
Sneaks into the big dance.
Women's basketball regular season champions or A10 conference tournament champions.
Conference tournament. We're going for it all this year.
Zach Austin or Cam Simone as a co-broadcaster.
Oh boy, that's a good one. Uh I've done more with Cam. I'll give it to Cam, but I love Zach.
Uh, Newport propane ball launch or the Lucky Seven dice roll game.
um, oh boy, the Lucky Seven seems like a pretty rough one. I would probably go with the ball launch.
Exactly. Steve McDonald or Chris Desano.
Oh, Steve is a legend.
Steve is legend. That's one of Zach's role models besides Stone Freeman and icons, of course. Well, good sir, I want to thank you again for taking the time to come on and chat for about an hour's worth of time of what's been up since we last spoke in URI basketball, women's basketball, and looking forward to this was a good treat, my friend. So thanks again.
Thank you so much, Nolan. It's always great to be a part of it, and anytime you want me back on it,
Yeah.
I'll be happy to do it.
Well, when you become a big time broadcaster for ESPN or ABC or Fox Sports, although I'm sure we'll do it again at some point before then. But is there anything that you want people to look out for with yourself or anything of that nature in the future?
No, just tune in on ESPN Plus. And, I hope I can get as many viewers as I can for those last three games. So, just tune in and go to a women's basketball game,
Yeah.
please. But yeah, in the meantime, I'll just be doing my own thing. So, um, I wish the best of luck to everybody, kind of in my community, and um, yeah, just looking forward to seeing what everybody does. Zach and Nathan and all those guys. So.
Well, when my guest today, Kyle Standing, becomes a broadcaster, the lead broadcaster, the head broadcaster for the CBS men's and women's national championship tournament, in a few years from now, you're going to say, holy shit, I should have subscribed to the podcast back then. So do yourself a darn favor by liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, all that fun jazz, as they usually say in the cringe statements, because you're going to say, wow, that was worth it in the end. Follow on Twitter, Nolan Cart Night, Instagram, Nolan Cart Night Show for more updates and news regarding to the podcast. Hopefully you enjoy this. And in the words of Johnny Carson, the DM Pop shows, unlike this one, of course, so I bid you all a heartfelt good night. Take care.